ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and those members of the public who may be on the live stream of this meeting of the Forensics Committee of the Scottish Police Authority. And by way of introduction, I'd like to welcome first meeting as official representative of partner Crown Office Procurator Fiscal Service, Ruth McQuaid, who is replacing Kenneth Donnelly, the Procurator Fiscal, who previously attended and supported us in our work. And a gratitude, obviously, to Kenneth, and a sincere welcome, and looking forward to working with yourself, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Tom. Delighted to be here.
Excellent. Now, by way of apologies, with apology noted from SPA board member Paul Eadie, and we also have an apology noted from Chief Superintendent Steve Dolan from Police Scotland. Stevie is represented today by DCI Richie Taylor, so a welcome to Richie Taylor as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Moving on into our agenda before we go any further, in item 1.2, are there any declarations of interest in terms of this meeting, other than those that are noted in the websites? No, none noted, thank you. We move then to the minutes from the meeting of the Forensics Committee that was held on the 2nd of February 2022, and that is for approval. Before we do there, and the minutes have been circulated. Any comments received have been reacted to. Are members content to note the published minute from the 2nd of February as an accurate record? They are approved accordingly. We then move on to item 1.4, which is the action log for that meeting and the matters arising. There are 3 actions that are proposed for closure and 2 actions proposed as ongoing. Closure is the action relating to the timeline and progress for accreditation in terms of digital forensics. This work has been updated and will be given as standing 6-monthly updates to this committee on the progress towards achieving accreditation. So it's embedded in the work of the committee. Is everybody content to close that action? The second action is regarding, again, digital forensics. Was a discussion about where it sits in the wider policing family in terms of the responsibility. There was a meeting held between Police Scotland and the Forensic Service, and it's agreed that where it is as previously discussed in the working group around digital forensics, there is no proposed change to that at this time. So content to close that. The next action was around workforce planning. An outline of the workforce plan will be presented today for discussion, so it's proposed that this is ongoing. Is everybody content with that? And the next one around the performance reporting, outline KPIs have been developed in line with the memorandum of understanding between partners that's in design and development at the moment, and no doubt the actual KPIs will be subject to further discussion with the partners. But in terms of developing the KPIs and from Forensic Service, that has been done, but it's given that there'll be further developments, so it's intended that they'll be ongoing. Before I go any further, I see I've got one hand up from Jane Ryder. Jane, you got a comment to make on this before we decide on it?
No, it was. I'm fine with propose ongoing and what you said. Just, do we have any indication of when? And presumably these will come to the committee. Just some sort of sense of timeline within 3 months, 6 months, this year? Question mark. That's
Fiona, I
indicative
know other
at the
partners
moment.
are on the line, but you've been
Mhm.
heavily involved in coordinating this MOU work. Can you give an update on that?
Certainly. So they will come with the final version of the Memorandum of Understanding, Jane. So I would hope to the next meeting of the committee with the final agreed version of the MOU.
That would be splendid.
Thank you. Any other comments around that at this time? So that action is ongoing. And the next action was around the work in terms of demonstrating value of forensic science in the wider system. There is a short life working group established, and the terms of reference have now been circulated. And so that work is a work stream now. So it's intended in terms of this action to close it. Is everybody content with that? Okay, that's closed. And that's in terms of the actions that we have that were live at that time. Moving on then, in terms of item 1.5 and the SPA's standing orders, section 20, I'm inviting members to agree to take the agenda items 10 to 18 in private. Are members content to take those in private for the reasons that are in that standing order? That's agreed. Item 2, moving on to substantive discussions today, invite Fiona Douglas, the Director, to present her or speak to her report, the Director's report. Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. So it's been a very busy period since I last reported to the Forensic Services Committee, with a lot of activity ongoing within forensic services. Running through some highlights from my report, COVID and the pandemic continue to pose some challenges around the services which we provide, and in particular over this reporting period we have seen an increase in absence associated with COVID, which has caused some challenges particularly for our scene examination services on 2 occasions through this period. We have worked collaboratively with colleagues in Police Scotland to manage those instances when we have experienced some interruption in our service, and we've mitigated any impact associated with that during this period. Forensic Services continues to go through consultation around the introduction of our new operating model and also the restructure of the senior management team. With regards to the senior management team restructure, as of just the end of last week, the recruitment for vacant posts within that structure has now started, with adverts being issued for those posts, and consultation is due to conclude next week with presentation back to the trade unions at the JNCC. The wider consultation on the far more detailed and far more wide-ranging consultation on our new operating model continues, and as we move on through the addenda today, Vicky will provide an update on the detailed work that's ongoing in relation to the new operating model. Performance across the organisation continues to be strong. And we have by and large now reached a good position with regards to the demand for forensic services against the capacity within the organisation, with the exception of our toxicology casework, which again we'll come on to and cover in more detail in the agenda this afternoon. We continue to work to prioritise any spiking cases with colleagues in Police Scotland to make sure that those cases are worked on as soon as they are received, and there's no delay in the progression of the spiking cases through the toxicology section within Forensic Services. There will be updates later in the agenda with regards to progress on the work associated with the HMICS recommendations, and also to cover off the detailed progress report in relation to Project Weaver, which is a transition of the post-mortem toxicology service from Glasgow University to Forensic Services, which continues to progress well. On the 1st of April, the Forensic Medical Services Act came into force. And forensic services, a number of members of staff within the organisation have worked very hard with colleagues across a range of sectors to provide a substantial amount of advice in relation to sampling guidance and environment, in particular in relation to examinations of victims of sexual offences. So it's certainly hoped that that will improve the service which can be provided to victims of sexual crime moving forward, and also ensure the preservation and the integrity of any forensic evidence that is collected in those cases. So a busy period, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Fiona. Can I offer it up to members for questions to Fiona at this time? Yeah. One question. I see Caroline has got her hand up. Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Fiona, for your report. It's great as always. I just was wondering, in response to your update on the COVID absences, I think this is hitting just about everybody at the moment. Is this starting to cause backlogs? Because we've been working very hard to get on top of these, and it would be sad if this was causing us to fall behind again. So I'm just wondering on that. And my second point, oh, actually, do the first one first. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Caroline. By and large, I would say no. It has some impact, particularly on our responsive service provision, because clearly we need to make sure we have sufficient staff in that can respond, particularly to a scene of crime within a period of time. With regards to casework examination, we do have hybrid working practices in place, which we've had since the start of the pandemic. And that means that people can continue to work from home, providing they're not suffering from COVID as an actual acute illness. Therefore, we're able to continue to maintain performance despite having people, needing to self-isolate as a result of testing positive.
Well, that's reassuring to know. That's good. And just in relation to spiking, I know this is something that's come up at the board quite a lot, just a rise in spiking. Are you seeing that kind of coming through in terms of the volumes that you're dealing with? And what types of things is it being used to spike with? And is it any injection spiking, or is it just spiking drinks as things? Or do you know?
I'll ask Alistair Patience to answer that question, Caroline, if that's okay. Alistair?
Thanks very much, Fiona. So in terms of the number of samples that are coming in, they're relatively stable.
Right.
And in terms of the sort of drugs that we're seeing, most of them are fairly typical out in the environment there.
Right. Okay.
So the updates are provided to Police Scotland weekly in relation to the progression of the samples.
And Alistair, I don't know whether you can tell this. You might not be able to. And it might be a question more for the police. It's just that down south, I know they're seeing an increase in more needle spiking. We haven't really seen that up here. Are we seeing any of that coming up here?
I'm not sure
Or
I'd be
you
able to
probably
answer
can't
that one. To
tell,
be honest,
your
Caroline,
samples.
no, I wouldn't be best placed to answer that one. Sorry.
Thanks for your.
Okay, I'll come back to spiking in a moment. Jane, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, funnily enough, it was in relation to spiking. It's just that, as I recall, the evidence from Police Scotland, and I can't now remember whether it was to this committee or to the board, was that the incidence was very much less in Scotland than down south. And therefore, it's interesting to marry that with what Alistair is saying about relatively stable numbers. I mean, it's not to say it's not important, but that's my recollection of what we had heard previously.
Yeah, colleagues may be able to put more context in that in terms of the prevalence of it in society and the types of drugs that are if any, are coming up in analysis. That may be a more detailed report that we can bring forward at some point with more time to consider that, Alistair. And maybe we could look at that briefing on spiking. One of the areas that is of public concern and was reported as recently as last weekend in media is the time it takes to get the results from analysis. Now, we've already heard from members of the reporting to this committee through Fiona and yourself and others, that the work in doing the analysis around spiking cases is very complex and complicated and can take time. And one of the points I noted in your report today, Fiona, was that some of these analysis results might take months. Now, if you're a victim of what you believe to be spiking, that is very worrying and disconcerting, and you don't know what's happened to you. So it would be really helpful if you were able to give us some explanation of why it takes months for people who are not scientists, and in terms of victims first, reassuring members of the public. That could we maybe touch base on that for a moment?
Certainly, Chair. So I'll answer the question as best I can, and then I'll ask Alistair if he wants to add to that. The cases which we're dealing with when spiking is involved are very complex. There's often a number of different analyses that need to be undertaken to look for different substances. And that's a complex analytical process that needs to be followed, that takes time. The results are the most complicated that we will look at from a toxicology perspective, because there are a number of different substances, and also needing to take into account any medication that the potential victim in those circumstances may also be taking. So from a scientific perspective, the results of the analysis are quite well, very detailed, and there are a number of other factors that need to be layered on top of that allows the scientists then to offer the results and their opinion with regards to the outcome in a particular case. But Alistair, I'll ask you to add to that.
Thanks very much, Fiona. So that was actually a very good answer there indeed. So in terms of the process for analysis, it is complex. It is time consuming up to a point, depending on what and how many drugs are required to be analysed. As Fiona said, it can take several months. In terms of reassurance, I can reassure the committee that there's no delays as such. These samples are processed as a priority by forensic services, and they're dealt with as rapidly as we are able. Thank you.
Before I move to Jane, and I think it's a follow-up question, but the point here is about the necessity for it to take several months. Is there any influence on that we can impact through investment or business processing, etc., lean management, etc.?
We're always looking for ways to improve and speed up the services that we offer. With regards to the instrumentation, I think we have the best quality instrumentation we have invested in over the past few years in relation to toxicology, as well as investing significantly in the environment within which the analysis is undertaken. The challenges within toxicology, we will continue to talk about, I'm sure, through the rest of this meeting, particularly in regards to the volume of drugs driving Section 5A analysis that's required, as well as the other toxicology services that we offer in terms of alcohol testing as well. So that pulls on the same group of people that are also undertaking the toxicology analysis. So there's a need to consider more broadly investment within toxicology as an area. And spiking cases are part of that, but we will continue to prioritise the spiking cases and ensure that the analysis is completed as quickly as it can be. However, the analytical process is complicated, and it will continue to be complicated through any further investment within that area.
Jane Ryder, can I invite you?
Well, I think my question was going to be very much along your lines, Chair, which is what can we do to improve the situation? But I do recognise exactly what Fiona has said, that we need to see this in a context. You can't over prioritise it if, in fact, there are other competing priorities which are going to be even more going to require even more investment, resource, and difficult choices. So I accept what Fiona said. This is an ongoing issue. This is an ongoing issue in context. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the broader investigation of spiking cases, we have representatives of Police Scotland and Crown Office, Procurator, Fiscal Service, specifically around the analysis of the samples which this committee is focused on. Are there any issues you would wish to raise or concerns that you have that we have to take on board? Okay.
From Scotland perspective, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
So we are focused in the area that is significant for this committee, which is the analysis of the samples, and that's, we're reassured that that maintains the highest priority. The focus is on supporting victims in this scenario, and that but whatever we can do, we will do to make sure that maintains its priority of getting the results for the investigation going forward. But there's no other issues that are raised at this time. Either Laura or Ruth, who are both on the call, I take it that's captures the position.
That's correct.
Right, thanks very much for that. Okay, are there any final questions to Fiona regarding the director's report today? The substantive items that she's refers to are in discussions that are taking part in the agenda. Can we move on then to item 3, which is the Forensic Services Performance Report for Q4, Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. So the report has been provided, which includes the usual reporting set with regards to forensic services performance. I'll just highlight a few areas and then open up for any questions. So if I take you to 2.1 within the report, which is on page 4, you'll see the overall position within forensic services in terms of the open cases within the laboratory and the average age of those cases. And then across to the right-hand side there, we have the charts which look at the demand and output for casework split into work that we undertake that's instructed by the Crown and work that's instructed by Police Scotland, which is the orange bars. If I take you through to page 5, that provides the more detailed view of what the demand for our casework has been across the quarter, which is that we're looking at here, which is Q4. Overall, the demand is reduced in Q4 in comparison with Q3. However, as you can see from the charts, there has been an increase in demand for services in March, which has been a bit of a spike. I think that's really down to some initiatives within Police Scotland, which has resulted in an increase in demand towards the latter part of the quarter. Overall, from a timeliness perspective, though, we are starting to see some reductions. However, there is a slight increase in the ageing of the casework that we have within the organisation in regards to drugs analysis and also in regards to work being undertaken within our mark enhancement laboratory. So that's the part of forensic services that looks at productions for both fingerprints and DNA before then routing samples further into the laboratory for reporting to our partners. Then if I take you to 2.2, you can see the more detailed view of toxicology demand over this period. And you can see that there has been a reduction in demand over the last 3 months. And we are seeing an increase in output. So it is moving towards being a more favourable position. However, there are some significant challenges within the latter part of the quarter and into this the start of this reporting year. for the toxicology provision, as we've already discussed. With regards to our senior examination services on page 7, we are meeting 85% of scenes attended within 24 hours against the target of 90%. And you can see that we still have some variation across the country with regards to that service provision. We are seeing an increase in evidence recovery rates over this period. And that has been an area that there has been some more detailed analysis undertaken. It is always a balancing act with regards to evidence recovery rates to make sure that we are recovering items that are going to add value to the investigation through the subsequent analysis that happens within the laboratory. On page 9, we have the quality report. We have had substantial amount of activity within this period in relation to addressing the recommendations that were made through the annual assessment visits that UCAS undertook at the end of the calendar year. So all of the evidence associated with that has been returned to UCAS, and we're awaiting confirmation of our reassessment on the back of that visit. We are also in discussions with regards to this year's assessment activity, and Craig Donaghy, our head of quality, is having good constructive discussion with UCAS in regards to how that will look. With regards to absence on page 10, I'll just highlight the increase that we are seeing in absence as a result of COVID and other factors. And it is running significantly higher than our absence rate in the previous year, which again we're hoping will come back down as the rates of COVID in the population ebb and flow with the national tracking of infections. So I'll pause at that point and open up to any questions on the report.
Okay, with a question from members. Jane Ryder.
Yes, thank you very much, Fiona. Very informative as always. I mean, I see the fluctuations, a bit of spiking, but I think my question is whether those are within, a normal margin, as it were. But my second, so that's a general question. My second was actually on the accreditation and seeing a 13% increase on the reassessment effort for surveillance. That seems quite high and out of kilter with the rest. So could you, and it said it will be robustly challenged by the head of quality, which I'm sure it will be, and perhaps Craig could give some insight at this point into why that is, and what is being done about it.
Thank you, Jane. Sorry, Craig, I'll just open up and then I'll bring you in. So with regards to your first question, Jane, I don't think there's any significant spikes or trends that we need to be concerned about across the performance report. I do think it's the standard ebb and flow that you would expect to see. So we'll continue to monitor those trends in more detail internally within our internal governance process, but nothing I need to bring to the attention of the committee. With regards to the assessment activity, it is a significant increase. There does not seem to be a logical explanation for that at this time, given that what happens within a 4-year cycle is every 4 years we are reassessed, and then the 3 years within that is a surveillance activity to ensure that we continue to meet the standard. And we have just gone through the reassessment just at the end of last year. So we would anticipate and expect that the activity would be less this year than last year. However, it is also important to note that we do continue to extend our scope of accreditation to ensure that we do have as many activities as possible accredited. Therefore, it's not directly comparable year on year with regards to assessment activity, because the actual scope of accreditation is increasing year on year. But I'll let Craig come in at that point. Craig, please.
Thanks, Fiona. Thank you, Jane, for the question. There is always a certain amount of negotiation, shall we say, with the assessment time that UCAS propose. In the past, we have been successful in reducing that on-site time, and there's also a little bit of give and take where perhaps they've identified something nationally within forensic science that they wish to have a look at and provide assurance to themselves and to us that everything is in order and compliant with the standard. So I'm waiting for UCAS to come back. We will have further discussions, but I would anticipate a reduction in that 13% to something much more acceptable. As Fiona says, the extensions to scope that we've conducted increase the amount of work that is accredited. However, it doesn't equal that percentage increase. So we'll have those further discussions.
I would welcome that that further clarification, because it does look like a bit of an outlier, because I do recollect you saying last time we'd just been through the accreditation, actually they had been able to pull back a little on a reliance of good past practice, and so that seemed to be going in the opposite direction. So I just want some reassurance that it's not a matter of concern, that perhaps there is a thematic, perhaps it's the extension of scope. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks for that, Craig. Caroline Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks again for this report. Very interesting read. I get my question was really was building on Jane's, I guess, about the ebb and flow of demand. But when you look at those sort of demand profiles across there's only about one. I think it's the Mark. Is it called Mark?
Mark enhancement. Mark
enhancement one that we're kind of really below the levy on. The rest we're kind of moving up to or exceeding the levy. And I was just wondering, we've used outsourcing for toxicology, and that seems to be helping sort of bring that down. Is that something that we have considered further services for? And my second question, I guess, to that is, once Project Weaver's fully onboarded and into forensic services, will that give us any more capacity in these kind of areas, or is that going to be specifically for that? Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Caroline. I think mark enhancement's a slightly difficult one because it's actually part of the process as opposed to delivering a result in itself. So the results that are delivered by that part of forensic services are usually the negative ones where they don't find anything.
Right.
And the positive ones then result in further analysis that happens in fingerprints or happens within biology primarily. So it's part of the process. It is an area that's under stress at this point, and there is a plan that has been well developed and is in place to recover that performance over time. So we are able to focus in on that area and to deliver that improvement, and we are actually reporting that back regularly and into our performance discussions. So we can flex to some extent to support delivery of that. When we have our new operating model, that will be far more straightforward because we'll have the ability to multi-skill and flex resource far more across the organisation than we do just now. So I don't think there's a requirement to consider outsourcing. By and large, I think the position across the organisation is quite positive, and we've certainly, I think, gone over a hump with regards to the challenges around capacity and demand, which we've talked about over the last few years in particular. And the work that has been done and supported by the committee, as well as the investment decisions that were made just over 2 years ago now, particularly to invest within biology, are really paying dividends because we can now see that capacity line is sitting by and large above the demand that's coming in. And that allows us to start to eat into any sort of backlogs and caseloads that we have across the organisation and start to improve the timeliness of the provision of the results. So that's quite a positive step forward. Some of the more detailed work that we've done around the strategic workforce plan shows the areas where we need to focus in on over the next 4 or 5 years, and allows us to look at and respond to future demand based on a forecast, which we've not had before.
Right, thank you. Thanks for that. That was just...
Fiona, looking at the broad performance report in terms of demand and capacity and outputs. The areas that stand out, I mean, in terms of timelines as well, toxicology is the longest running analysis. And it's interesting that drugs being separate from toxicology, and a lot of people make the mistake of not separating that out, is much less than where it is in toxicology. And Operation Weaver, which is a Project Weaver, which is the name we've used for the integration of post-mortem toxicology coming later in the year, it comes back, is in there as well. So there's a couple of things about reassurance that the introduction of that service won't worsen the position around toxicology, is the first thing. And the second question is around, we don't have the ability in the reporting as it is at the moment, and we're working on this, benchmarking of how these timelines look in Scotland compared to elsewhere in the UK or in other laboratories. Could you reflect on those two areas for us in terms of how we interpret this performance report, which I might add, I recognise is in a period of extreme pressure on you in terms of COVID absences and the flexibility of the workforce here and responsiveness of the workforce should be complemented by the committee, in my view.
Thank you, Chair. So two different questions. If I take Project Weaver first, Project Weaver has a dedicated resource associated with managing the that transfer of service from Glasgow University to forensic services. There does need to be support from toxicology staff within forensic services to assist with that. And we have recruited additional capacity to allow that to happen and to release staff into supporting Project Weaver. So that it's a well-managed and controlled project, but we do need to continually pay attention to the challenges that our toxicology service are under, and to make sure that it's not disrupted through any abstraction associated with Project Weaver. So it's a balancing act, I would say. It's working quite well at the moment, and certainly the project it has flexibility within it to make sure that we are supporting the operational toxicology service as well as delivering the transition. With regards to benchmarking, I mean, it is a different environment in Scotland in comparison with England and Wales, which is a commercial marketplace for forensic science provision. So we won't be able to do a like-for-like analysis of the timeliness of provision in Scotland in comparison with England and Wales, where the demand for those services is a decision made primarily around affordability, and each sample is charged on and a service is guaranteed, if you like, as part of a contract provision. So it's a different environment, but I certainly think that within the work that we will do on our performance framework, which we'll develop over the coming year, we'll be able to more clearly establish the context of the performance which we're reporting and how that really impacts on public and community safety in Scotland, but hopefully also then reflect on how that looks in comparison with other similar forensic science organisations, to provide that extra context for the committee to consider.
Thanks for that. I mean, it will continue to be a focus of the committee, no doubt. Timeliness has got a direct connection towards confidence in the service that we deliver, and you know, the market conditions shouldn't be there might be an explanation, but not the reason if the position is not as favourable as it is elsewhere. But we'll continue to focus on this issue, don't we? Mm-hmm. Jane, I saw you put your hands up and then put down, just in case. Okay. That seems to be the questions around the performance report. I found members quite content with that. We've given it a good airing just now. But I do want to acknowledge the commitment from staff in delivering this performance report, particularly, you look at all public services just now in terms of the impact of COVID and you know, contact centres, all the rest of it. and to maintain the service at the level it is quite an effort, and we acknowledge that. So thank you everyone involved in that. Moving on then to item 4, which is the annual assurance report, and I know that Jennifer Muir's name's against the actual papers. I don't know if you want to, is it yourself or Jennifer who's going to speak first?
I'll just introduce
Okay.
the paper, Tom, and I'll ask Jennifer if she's got any further
Thank you.
comments to add. So the annual assurance report has been completed for forensic services, which feeds into the SPA overall governance statement. So the annual assurance report sets out the internal controls which we have within forensic services to provide assurance that the organisation's objectives and requirements will be achieved. So there's a detailed analysis that has been done, which is provided for information within the appendix of the report. There are no issues to bring to the attention of the committee in regards to the review that has been done, and I'm satisfied that we have appropriate controls in place to be able to provide assurance to the SPA and also through to the Forensic Services Committee in regards to the work of forensic services. Jennifer, would you like to add to that?
Thank you, Fiona. No, other than we'll be also going to the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee as well for their sort of visibility and assurance as well. But it is a comprehensive assessment. There's a lot of information there, but it is a worthwhile exercise, and it does provide us that confidence that we do have robust controls in place.
Thank you. Can I offer it to members? Jane Ryder?
Yes, well, I suppose I'm wearing a dual hat, you know, as the chair of ARAC, but I have to say it's the most comprehensive assurance report I've ever seen. Actually, it is an exemplar. I mean, Forensic Services is in a somewhat different place from the other committees for which ARAC receives assurance reports, because it is operational in a way that the other committees aren't. So it sits at a different level. Nevertheless, I mean, it's a prodigious piece of work, very well done indeed. I mean, I think you have, with this, to be correct, you've really based it on Scottish Government, the departmental, and you can sort of see that where it talks about, you know, the bodies you sponsor and things like that. So it doesn't sit easily, but nevertheless, I mean, all credit to you for the depth of and breadth of work that's gone into that. It does give me a deep assurance. So thank you very much.
That's encouraging. Caroline Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. And really just to add to that, because when I read it, I thought, wow, this is good. So I just wanted to say well done. I thought it was a great piece of work. A great job.
Thanks for that. And I would encourage, if there are interested parties joining us today, the document is on the website, and it is a significant review giving assurance of forensic services that I commend to you. One question I've got, Fiona, for yourself, Fiona, when we talk about equality and diversity within it, yeah, I mean, there's no question about the commitment, but I didn't hear specific. I didn't see specific reference to staff associations like which are broader within Police Scotland and the SPA around SEMPA, for example, with minority community colleagues and for instance LGBTQI groups as well. Do you have that ongoing connection and discussion with them, or is it within that broader SPA context that's already happening?
Thank you, Tom. We have an equality, diversity and inclusion subgroup of our people board within forensic services, as well as a forensic services equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. The subgroup itself has a range of stakeholders that attend those meetings, and we have representation across a range of staff associations. So we have a very good, active group that is considering a range of improvements that we can make around that, as well as that being at the heart of a number of areas within our strategy and in the change programme and the new operating model for forensic services. Which we also have consulted with the staff associations in regards to. So we have good dialogue, I would say, in forensic services with the individual staff associations, and are progressing that alongside the work that is happening within the wider SPA and Police Scotland.
Jennifer, is there the opportunity to be more expressive about that in the report, or is it beyond that stage?
No, I'll link in with our colleagues at SPA Corporate, and I'll see if we can actually make some additions into that section.
It's just about reflecting the reality of where we are. And,
okay.
You know, I can't state enough how important that engagement is. Jane Ryder? Yes,
I mean, I'm not asking for a change in this, but maybe it's worth flagging up. Looking forward, I think there's going to be an increasing emphasis in respect of audit and assurance on ESG, environment, social, and in the sense you've addressed that, but and the environmental, which of course is at the heart of forensics anyway. But I think we might want to include that in the next assurance report. I'm not asking for a change in this, but as I say, I'm just flagging up a theme for the future.
Okay. So as Jane, as chair of ARAC, even still to consider this, but outlined at the start of the conversation, this is an exemplar as a report, as we're saying. And so just to commend you, Jennifer, and your team, and Fiona, on this report. It really was a very broad, encompassing read that gives us assurance, and we are asked in the paper to note it, and I think that's exactly what we do. Any other points on that at this time? Okay, thank you. Moving on then to item 5, Vicky Morton, it's the Forensic Service Change Programme update, please.
Great, thank you, Chair. So this paper outlines the key aspects of the last few months in terms of the change programme overall. So start off firstly with the launch of the Forensic Services Strategy. So internally, the official launch will take place later on this week, actually, at the Forensic Services Leadership Day. And this will really set the direction and organisational priorities for this year. But alongside that, we obviously want to make sure that the external launch is effective, and really with there we're aiming to promote how forensic services support the criminal justice sector overall, and that public confidence aspect as well. So this is planned for the summer this year. In terms of point 3 in the report, professional development, of course, continues across the organisation, and also as outlined in part 4, and Fiona will come on to this later on in the agenda, the value of forensic science is one of the key parts of the business plan for this year. And we're really pleased to hear that the Leverhulme Institute at the University of Dundee are very, very keen to work with us in this area. Obviously, continuous improvement and continues across the organisation. There's a couple of examples there noted in the report. But just focusing more on the change activity in terms of the significant projects. Overall, just to reinforce again that the resourcing within the project and the programme team has significantly increased over the last 6 months or so. So we're very pleased to have that support from our Police Scotland colleagues. In terms of the overarching programme itself, it's sitting at amber, and essentially that status is amber due to a couple of things. The core operating system and data migration and governance projects have at this point been put on hold for a couple of months, just because we don't have the project management resource in place. They are going through the recruitment vetting process at the moment, so hopefully that's not going to be too much longer. And also in terms of the operating model project itself, there's been a significant amount of effort and focus on the counter proposal process, listening to our staff, understanding their views on the proposals and evaluating alternatives that have been put forward. So overall, the operating model is sitting at green, and you can see in section 7.1 of the report a little more detail there. So really that's been focused in the last few months around the consultation, the evaluation of preference form submissions, and also, as I've said, a significant amount around the counter proposal activity. We're looking at planning for the conclusion of that consultation and report to the JNCC around June this year. Deployment of scene examination, again, projects performing well, looking at a green status, as is always also the case with the Access to Lab project as well. As I've said, 7.4, data migration and governance, red because of the project management support, but just to say that a lot of activity is already ongoing in terms of that, in terms of more of the business as usual, in terms of GDPR compliance, etc. And lastly, just to mention Project Weaver, which you'll have seen in Fiona's report, the governance there has now transitioned into the change programme as of the 1st of April. And this again is progressing well, sitting at amber at the moment. And just wanted to reiterate as well the significant amount of assistance and support from our partners in relation to this piece of work as well, particularly around people and development and digital division as well, as we transition into the next phase of that project. So happy to open up to any questions.
Jane Ryder.
Thank you, Vicky. I noted, and I'm particularly interested in data migration and governance. I'd like to think this is only in red because of the fact the project manager has only just started, but I do note that the scope is still to be finalised. I'm not sure, you haven't mentioned anywhere, and I don't know if it's relevant, either DESK, Digital Evidence Sharing Project, or biometrics. I mean, it seems to me that data migration is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the data issues, and I just wanted some insight, oblique assurance as to the scope of the data dimension of this, and are we sure that it's sufficiently addressed within, because as I say, it seems to me that migration is simply the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the data considerations. So can you just explain how all of the data considerations are taken into account? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Jane. Good question. As always, in terms of, and you're absolutely right, it is very, very complicated indeed. And what we have been doing over the last few months is in understanding the landscape, the ICT systems landscape from a Police Scotland perspective in more detail, because it's not just the current Police Scotland systems, but also, as you say, the wider programmes around DESK, for example. And that is more aligned into the core operating system project, I would say, because that's really around understanding where we are, where Police Scotland are going, where we wish to go, and how we can ensure it's the right way forward that we take there. The data migration and governance, it's Gary Holcroft who's leading on this project, and you're right, there's a lot of activity, as I said, as well around the BAU activities around data migration from our current legacy systems into the future. So the two projects really align, and I think the focus at the moment is around GDPR compliance, making sure we have the right processes in place, and then we build that into the future core operating system as well.
Yeah. Jane, if you follow?
Yeah. Well, noted. I'm not sure it entirely reassures me yet that they are sufficiently aligned and, well, not even aligned, they're interdependent. And it's fine being GDPR compliant with the data and the processes that we have, but as you say, for the core operating model, you might need to move into something completely different. And so, yeah, I'm a little skeptical, but it's definitely one I would wish to keep a very close eye on, and the more reporting you can do on that, I think the better, if you would be so kind. Fiona, if you may.
So I know I've got Caroline's hand up, but Fiona, you put your hand up. Is it related to that point?
Yeah, just to provide some further assurance, Jane, you're absolutely right, and I think we recognise the complexity of that landscape. We're not starting from a standing position with regards to this project, because a lot of work was done on it. However, I think once that's stalled and we now have a new project manager working on it, I think the need for us to look at that project scope again is to make sure it includes all of those different areas that you've described, and to make sure that that detailed change landscape is taken into consideration in terms of the project brief. And as Vicky says, you know, the initial phases are around GDPR compliance, but then the broader landscape is complex with everything that's coming with regards to desk and other changes within Police Scotland digital division, as well as changes to Police Scotland core operating system. All of that needs to come together, and it does have a huge interdependency with the core operating system project to make sure we get the design of that appropriate. So the two kind of go hand in hand, and it's important that we get all colleagues to agree what the scope of that looks like and what sits within data migration and what sits within the core operating system, so it's clear.
I see Howard Kennett's got his hand up. Is it connected to this same point, Howard?
Yeah, it is. It's just to give a bit of reassurance that we are in discussion with Desk. So we had a meeting on Friday with them, myself and Ken Clatcher. Had a meeting with Desk just to make sure that they are aware of what we're proposing within forensics and the fact of where we're looking to be included, because actually there is a massive impact. And also it's not just about the core operation solution, it's about things like if we go to digital evidence for fingerprints, it's all of those additional areas that that's just one example, but actually making sure that we're linked into them. So we're very much aware now, or they're very much aware now, of the fact that we've got 3.5 to 4 million images sitting that potentially we'd need to put store somewhere. The question is whether they've got funding to allow them to do it, or whether that needs to come into ourselves. Somewhere down the line we'll have to store it, but you know, keep it stored and make sure it's up to date. As far as the work around at the moment, yes, it's about a prioritization piece. It's about making sure that we look at the GDPR compliance and the critical systems that we have. And it's not just GDPR compliance, it's actually around making sure that we've got security safe systems as well that are still going to be supported. So we're actually making sure that we're doing that, working with Police Scotland ICT and working alongside with internal forensics ICT. So there's a large number of people trying to make sure that we get that prioritization correct so that we can move on. When we come to the core op solution, yes, then we'll be looking at what the data migration is inside the core op solution. But at the moment, it's about making sure that the systems we currently have that are critical are compliant. Thank you, Chair.
So it seems that
just to marry that up, if I may, just to finalise, to marry that up, ARAC are having a deep dive into Desk this time next week. So it would be good if you could liaise with SPA colleagues and Police Scotland colleagues and just make sure that that dimension it is included. That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Howard. That's a good time to move over to Caroline. Sure.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that update, Howard, because it just built upon a question I was going to ask. So I think that's very good, but I absolutely wouldn't underestimate that storage capacity that you're going to require. And I'm just wondering, I'm taking it that Andrew Henry is all over this in terms of that architecture, because if you're designing these new core solutions, that's going to be quite it's a big ask and it's going to be very big and complex, and I'm not terribly sure that it's costed very well in the desk project, to be honest, or at all. In fact, when I looked at the figures. So do you want to come back on that now, Howard?
Yeah, just to say, I think you're right. My comment on Friday was someone's going to have to hold the images, so therefore somebody needs to cost it, and somebody needs to make sure that they built it into their budget. And therefore, if they need to actually say we're going to put it into desk, then they need to actually have that costed. If they're not going to put it into desk, then we need to look to see actually how do we make it, how do we make our information visible to everyone that needs it, to all of our partners that need it. So we've had that, we've started that discussion, but at the moment, nervousness.
Well, and you know, it's actually it's kind of bigger than that, actually, I would say, because it's almost like a managed service, because this is actually almost a business in its own right. Because you know, you're not just putting it on once and it stays there in perpetuity. So it's almost like running an old-fashioned library, if you will, because there'll need to be that active management of all this. And I don't think any of that's really been thought through. Vicky's got her hand up now; she's nodding as well.
It's you're right there, Caroline.
I think for the management of the meeting, we've got the point. I just want to go to Vicky now. And what's the response, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just to say that the engagement is ongoing with Police Scotland and colleagues wider in terms of the desk project itself and other interdependencies. So I'm confident we've got those good engagements and discussions ongoing. And as Fiona said, we've not started. We're not starting from square one here in the very beginning. We do have a very, very detailed scope around the core operating system, data migration and governance, which now we're taking that opportunity to refresh because things have moved on in the last year or so.
I think that'll be very helpful for this going forward, because it's going to be quite a big thing. And my real question actually was around the project manager. Your report articulates that we've brought in quite a lot of new ones. So and actually, you have talked about the fact that there's been a lot of new starts, which obviously has a time to build up to full speed. But actually, when you look at the projects and what's holding them up, it's resource on all of your kind of projects where they're being held up. And it's really just to get your kind of assurance around that, because you and every man and his dog's looking for these kind of resources right now, and they're very short in the market. And that could be your killer for a lot of these projects and knock your timescales out. So I was just wondering, and my final point was around, you used to have joint governance on Project Weaver with Police Scotland, but that's now moved to just forensics. I just wondered why that decision was made, especially because a lot of the project managers are from Police Scotland. And also because it's now amber and we've got 6 months to drop dead date, I'm just wondering, can we bring that back on track? Thanks. That's me.
Great. Thanks, Caroline.
I see Howard's got his hand up. Is those specific points that Caroline's raised around project management capacity? Yep. And Weaver in specific and reassurance around amber. Can we address the two of those, please?
Yeah, no problem. The resource issue that we currently have, we're very fortunate, I think, inside forensics at the moment, and in the fact that we've got quite a large team. The team is very young in its kind of experience to forensic services, and therefore that's where we're working. However, I have the one missing project manager, which is strange to say. If you look at Police Scotland generally, we have one missing project manager at the moment, and they are in vetting. So we're just waiting for them to come through vetting. So that one, I can't give you a specific date that says when they'll start. However, the rest of the team are coming up to speed really quickly. We're very lucky in the fact that we've got some really good colleagues that we're working with. So people like Vicky and Gary are really good. We've also got some internal staff that have been from Police Scotland. So my senior project manager has been on the team for a long time. So he's got some really good skills that actually he'd started and was running some of the projects alongside it. The piece with Project Weaver, from what I understand, is the fact we're running amber on the grounds that we have used a lot of our, if I said wiggle room, so we've used a lot of our time. We could be potentially green. We're on track to deliver. However, if things go wrong, then actually that's why we're sitting at amber. It's not necessarily because of the fact that we are so far running late. Gary's working extremely hard to make sure that we keep going. But I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Very
Now
thank you.
I've got Vicky and I've got Fiona's hands up. If on this theme, I reckon both you're connected into it. So who should go first? Vicky.
Thanks, Fiona. Just to say, in terms of Project Weaver, the change in governance from very much a shared governance between Police Scotland and ourselves, with obviously key partners being University of Glasgow and COPFS. That has transitioned into the Forensic Services change team with no detriment in terms of the resource aligned to that at all. And if anything, it's more aligned to the other projects ongoing within Forensic Services, really clear around the interdependencies, knowing more about that, because this phase relies less on things like estates, for example, and procurement as the first phase of Project Weaver, and more so on that integration, method development, and becoming part of us as an organisation. But obviously very, very key that P&D from Police Scotland and Digital Division, very, very key to success here. So
absolutely, that was my 2 points.
Yeah, exactly. And what we will have is we'll have the updates being provided, the scrutiny, the governance through this channel. Obviously, programme board from a change perspective sits below the Forensic Services Committee and has all partners involved, including representation from P&D, Digital Division, COPFS, staff associations, etc. And obviously, we report in through the change board within Police Scotland as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vicky. Fiona, have you got a final word on this? Okay, yeah, you're on mute.
Just to provide Caroline with some assurance that actually, as I think with the change in governance, there's more scrutiny and grip in relation to Project Weaver through the project board and programme board that Vicky's described. The project management is provided externally by Grant Thornton for Project Weaver, so we're not pulling on Police Scotland change resource in this area. So I think the change in governance provides me with greater assurance, visibility and grip with regards to decision making, and as Vicky said, the interdependencies with regards to the other change activities as well as business as usual.
Thanks, Fiona. That's good. It was really just because once you get past a certain point, it's the next phases are IT and people. They're the two critical ones. That was the only concern. Thank you.
Well, everyone, I think in terms of the change programme, we've given us a really good airing today. And just if I can sort of capture a sort of a top line summary of where I feel we are for the committee. Those projects around the target operating model, where staff consultation and the leadership team, etc., they're all green and they're making the progress we expect. And we've a way to go yet with what the final recommendations will be like. You then come into Weaver, which is a critical project. Bear in mind the negative experience that families of particular people who had suffered drug deaths face. This is a critical project. We are committed to it. It's got all the partners involved in that. And although it's showing amber, that is proper reporting on the project management, but we still have a confidence that it will be delivered to time, etc. And then the red projects are around basically the IT-enabled project and data migration. And that's a sensible decision to pause while we've got so much going on, to make sure that we don't create further risk in the system than is necessary. And indeed, that'll be picked up. And the dependencies with those broader, larger transformational projects like DESK, those have been picked up and discussed and fed in. And we've had the comfort of hearing from Howard today and how that those discussions are actually active in terms of the programme of change. So that's a very encouraging place to be. It's no shortage of investment. All of these projects take new money and involve new money, and that's been followed through in the resources committee and the budgets, etc. And it would take comfort from that as well. So that'd be my summation of it. Jane, I see you put your hand up.
Yes, I do. I think I absolutely take comfort from the fact that Howard has raised these issues. I don't think that's given us the assurance, and I wouldn't expect it, that they've been addressed, just to be clear.
Yeah, no, that's very clear, but it's not in the capability of this committee to take that on. It's, well, we can make sure the bits are joined up and that too. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I want to move on to item 6, which is the update on the HMICS inspection of the SPA Forensic Services. Vicky, over to you.
Great, thanks, Chair. I'm delighted to announce that all 23 recommendations from the 2017 HMICS domestic inspection have now been closed off. So that's a further 3 that have been closed since the last Forensic Services Committee in February. I'd just like to note that Forensic Services obviously recognises the significant amount of activity that both our people within Forensic Services, Police Scotland and COPFS have done and completed to enable the closure of these recommendations. Significant amount of work there, a lot of them very, very complex indeed, which is noted in previous reports. And also just to mention as well that we'd like to thank and acknowledge HMICS, particularly Jill Emery, QPM, previous Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary in Scotland, for the ongoing support and scrutiny, and we look forward to working with the new Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary in Scotland, Craig Naylor, in the future.
Thank you very much. I think we, as a committee, acknowledge the huge effort that's going in, not just within Forensic Services, but also in Police Scotland. Laura and your colleagues, if you pass it on, and the Crown Office, Procurator, Fiscal Service, to Ruth, but to get to a conclusion where a thematic and every action, a recommendation that came from that has been actioned and has been reported and written, accepted by HMICS, is a huge testament to the commitment. And I know, Vicky, yourself, you've led in that all the way through. So a great appreciation to you personally and your team, of course. So we'll note that, and that then takes that off the agenda as a standing item. So that itself is an achievement for any committee. So thank you very much. If I can move on then to item 7, which is demonstrating value, and then we've got a verbal update on this item from Fiona Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. So as mentioned when we reviewed the action register, we now have a meeting in the diary for the first short life working group to look at how we can demonstrate the value that forensic science brings within the justice system, but also more broadly than that. So that meeting will be on the 25th of May. A number of people have been invited to that session. I do think that we will extend the membership of the group after the initial discussions. One of the most important areas for that first meeting will be to determine the areas of focus for that group, to make sure that we have a sensible scale of activity that we plan to address within the year beyond that initial meeting, to make sure that we can bring back some meaningful outputs from those discussions. Given it's such a broad and nebulous area, I think it's so important that we identify a key part which is going to add some value in both the discussion, but also in that greater understanding of how forensic science contributes. So very much looking forward to the first meeting on the 25th of May.
Jane Ryder, please.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I am, as it were, the committee board committee champion, or whatever it is. Yes, I recognise we've had some good discussions already, and I think the shaping of the terms of reference and the idea of focus. So I am encouraged by where we've got to and the structured approach that's being taken. So I commend that, and I'm looking forward to the 25th of May.
Okay, thank you. So we note that position. Thank you. Moving on then to item 8, a substantive item here. Alistair Patience speaking to the drunk driving update.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I'll refer to my paper as read, and I'll draw out a few points on the way through. So as the committee will be aware, changes to the Road Traffic Act 1988 were enacted in Scotland the 21st of October 2019, so some 2.5 years ago. Forensic Services analysed blood samples from those who have been accused of drug driving, having tested positive for a banned drug at the roadside. Demand for Section 5A drug driving analysis remains higher than Forensic Services capacity, with the caseload remaining at an elevated level, although reducing steadily. So there's an improving outlook there. Outsourcing of Section 5A cases has continued since the last update to the Forensic Services Committee in February. Additional funding was approved by the Scottish Government in November, which is allowing around 900 cases to be outsourced. Improvement activity is continuing and will continue. Marginal gains with modest capacity increases have been implemented and been taken forward, but these initiatives will not solve the underlying issue of demand outstripping available capacity. The Forensic Services Target Operating Model project includes a potential increase in capacity for toxicology services. However, there is likely to remain a shortfall in capacity based on ongoing forecasting work undertaken by Police Scotland and Forensic Services. Building on the previous workshop-based discussions with partners mentioned in my previous update, further extensive dialogue with Police Scotland and COPFS have helped shape what options could be considered for the provision of the longer-term sustainable model. And 3 of these options would include margins for growth of the drug driving service in excess of the target operating model level of capacity, but would require a significant level of investment. The dialogue continued beyond the last Forensic Services Committee meeting, so the tripartite position paper was updated and agreed, and that paper has now been submitted to the Scottish Government for consideration. Local consideration has also been given to potential transition arrangements, and in addition to the implications and the recommendations there, it's just the recognition that this is a partnership challenge requiring a strategic partnership solution. And I think that's probably all that I'd want to say in terms of the paper, Chair, so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Alistair. I'm conscious that this is subject to further discussion for operational reasons and within the private session as well, but it's important recognising the public interest in this issue that we did give this update in the public session. So unless there are any questions for this point of the discussion, I would propose that we move that business into the private session. But in transparency, in my eagerness that we do reflect the public interest in this, we have given this update in the public session. Is everyone content with that position at this time? Thank you very much for that update, Alistair. And this continues to be a focus of the committee, recognising that this is a new service and reflecting the levels of demand in terms of drug driving in wider communities is higher than it was than we understood it to be when the capacity was being established. So on that, we're moving then to the item 9, which is the committee work plan. I'll just bring it up in terms of the next meeting. It's already before you. Is there any areas that are not being covered in that members feel should be included for the next committee meeting? The work plan is available on the website. Okay, so we accept that and note that work plan. So that brings us to the conclusion of the public business for today's committee meeting. I propose that we have a short comfort break of 5 minutes,